Good morning, Kyle.
Good morning, Anne. It's so good to see you after our moving break, our spring break.
Our spring break is right. Good morning, everybody. My name's Anne.Rossley. I'm here with my dear friend and colleague, Kyle Harvey. We sell real estate in downtown Chicago from the Baird & Warner Gold Coast office, and we love to come to you each week talking about real estate in downtown Chicago. Hello. We've had a few weeks off just to fill everybody in. Since you saw us last, Kyle has been in Paris. I have moved 2 properties, and
I'm set up in this new place that looks
set up in my new home, which you see behind me here. Right. And yeah, lots going on. And the spring market to boot has kept us very busy. So today, folks, we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about stats as always. The final numbers for April are in, and we'll talk about those. And then we're going to give advice. We're going to give advice to co-ops and condo buildings. So,
yes. Because we work a lot in the Gold Coast, Streeterville, along along Lakeshore Drive, all the way north. And we've got some advice to the larger condo associations and co-op buildings about how they can do even better.
But first, let's look at our statistics. And to do that, I'm going to have to A, remove our names, and B, pull up my stats. Here we go. Bear with me. Okay, so first we're going to look at houses in the lakefront neighborhoods. Number of homes closed in the month of April, 64 single-family homes closed. That was down almost 60% versus a year ago. Keep in mind, it was very, very busy. It was right before they put on the brakes with the high interest rates. So not a big surprise. Not a lot of inventory a year ago, but still we're down 60%. Number of homes under contract, 78. And you can see it's been kind of steady the last few months, but it is down 48% versus the previous year. Homes for sale. 239 homes are currently for sale. That's an uptick a little bit. It's about the same as what was for sale a year ago. I find that interesting. See, this
is a very interesting numbers, and it's across all price points.
Exactly right. So just to give you a sense, in 2018, 645 homes were for sale. In May of 18, just like as a comparison. All right, month supply of homes. How many months does it take to sell out what's currently listed, given our rate of sale? We're up to 3 months worth of inventory. Look, in 2022, we were down to like 1.5 months worth of inventory. And that's what, statistics always crack me up. We're up 58%, but it's still only 3 months worth of inventory. It's still very much a seller's market right now.
And we judge inventory, months of inventory based on the amount of activity. So if there are fewer homes to sell, there are fewer deals, which it's all in the math. So it's not that there's so many more homes. It's just that, and we'll talk more about what it really is about.
Yeah.
Things are slower. Yeah.
Median sales price is staying steady. We had this big jump up of about 10% that occurred post-COVID, and now it's leveling off. So basically a home in Chicago along the lakefront communities, keep in mind, is $1,253,000. That translates to $382 per square foot. And the number of showings has declined over the last couple of months. We're down to 4.5 showings per listing. Compare that, we were up over 7 when it was really crazy in the beginning of 2022. All right, let's take a shift and look over at condos. Now condos, interestingly compared, condos are making a big comeback right now. 934 condos closed. It's down versus a year ago, but if you look at it compared to where we'd been, it's coming back. We had only had 426 close in the month of December, so we're over twice that. Under contract, 995 went under contract in April. That's down 35%. But again, look at the comeback here. We're coming back off the trough. 2171 are for sale. That's down 34.4. So we have an inventory crisis in condos as well as family homes. And the absorption rate, it's only 2.7 months worth of inventory.
Which is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, look up here. We were at 8 months worth of inventory when everybody wanted to leave their COVID condos. And we're coming back. Median sales price, steady, Eddie, 400,000 for a condo in Chicago. But look at the number of showings. Now, granted, it did drop this month, but still 6.8 showings per listing. That is really strong. It was down to 3 in November, but this is almost as high as it's been for several years.
Yes. It is really interesting about condos coming back strong. Yeah. It's also one of the things that you're showing going back for houses and condos is the steadiness of value being held in Chicago.
Right. And you know what? That's so funny you say that. I talked to a guy yesterday from Memphis who's thinking about buying in Chicago as a second home. Love that. Despite all this crazy town news making it look like we're so different from every other city. So he's thinking about coming here. And he says to me, how are values? Because I keep seeing the news where, you know, property values are dropping. And I said, we didn't have that huge banana, big fluff that everybody else had, but we also don't have the trough either. It's just this nice, steady, you know, property values hold. It's all good.
Which is a great thing for Chicago because we always get such bad news here in Chicago. But the real estate news is relatively affordable for all the things that Chicago offers. I mean, Chicago offers a whole lot. Great universities, great museums, great cultural events, great hospitals. You've got a relatively strong employment base here.
Right.
Chicago has and it's got a beautiful lake, a great location, great airport, and great restaurants, theater, blah, 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 blah. With all that.
Yeah, absolutely right. So
we've got some challenges, but here we go. And one of the other great things is we didn't go bananas, to your point, and we haven't thus lost like some of these places that went bananas.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So let's talk showing time. This is that crazy town statistic based on January of 2014. But look at this. Showings are strong. 234 versus, keep in mind, January of 2014 was this arbitrary 100. So we're indexing 134% basically over that time period. Now, showings dropped. We were down in October of 22, but they're up, and they're up all over the U.S. So it's strong.
Yeah. These are from March, but April's going to probably be similar.
Yeah. And then, of course, we want to talk interest rates. This is the Freddie Mac average, and this is the one I go to all the time because it's, what do I want to say? It's a very steady number that reflects an average of everybody out there. So the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage is 6.39. And this line here shows where it's been over the 52 weeks. So it's ranged from 5 to 7, and we're at 6.39 right now. So
yeah. I like the way they show that. So you can see that it's where it is against it, the trend.
Yeah, against the range. So we're not at the top. We're not at the low. You know, we're in a good place right now. So that's it.
And I'm finding, and I think you are too, that buyers, even first-time buyers, have absorbed the real estate news, the interest rate news,
Right.
and recognize that they are buying the house and dating the rate, as we say.
Right.
You can always refinance if they get lower. And rents are not going down. A lot of people, I think we're noticing, have held their noses based on so little inventory, have held their noses and re-upped to rent another year. But rents aren't going down.
No.
They are likely to continue to go up.
And I think you're right. If we had more inventory, we'd certainly have more sales. So we'll see how it goes. All right.
Yeah.
So the topic we're going to talk about now, which I mentioned earlier, advice, stems from a situation going on in the building I live in, 310 Michigan Metropolitan Tower. And this building is not alone. I know 1440 Lakeshore Drive, for example, did the same thing. The building brought in 4 real estate agents who are experienced and know the market to talk about what's going on in the market and how the building can improve itself to maintain its values and to make wise investments over the next few years. And it's a really smart thing for these buildings to do. You and I have both seen it happen, Kyle, where these buildings will throw good money after bad, thinking that if they decorate this or do that, they're going to increase the value. And that's really not always the case. Yes, they want to maintain their common areas, but that's not going to be a panacea for everything that needs to be done. So we're going to talk today first about co-ops, what's going on with co-ops and what we see as the trends and what they can improve. And then we'll go on to condos and talk a little bit about that. So the co-op thing is near and dear to your heart, Kyle, right? Because you've had some stuff going on.
Yeah. First of all, I love vintage buildings. And I have a bunch of clients who love vintage buildings. And these co-ops, so my mother was in real estate back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And she sold a ton of co-ops. And co-ops were where rich Chicago would want to go live if they wanted to live in attached housing. So in a building versus in their own house. That's where they would go. They would try to get into one of these beautiful buildings, usually in the Gold Coast or Streeterville. And that was the goal.
And that was so they would have this large, gracious home that they didn't have to do all the work maintaining like a single family. They could entertain graciously. They would have great service, right? And because it was a co-op, and so there was a barrier to entry that, financially, because many of them were cash, if not 50% down at that time, then you didn't have,
It was, these buildings were built to replicate a single family home. Many of them are 6,000 square feet on a single floor or on a duplex floor. So this was where rich Chicago would want to live.
Right.
Now, rich Chicago is looking at beautiful new buildings.
9 Walton, St. Regis, 1 Bennett.
The Tribune. I mean, there are so many. So this decline in rich Chicago wanting these buildings has meant that their the price they receive at resale is way down, and the number of people who want it are fewer because there are things. So a co-op is a corporation, not an association. It's a corporation, and a condo or a condominium building is a number of properties all bound together through an association. A co-op is a corporation that where the residents have leases. They're shareholders and they have leases. So one of the things that I'm going to pull this over so I can. So co-op buildings now have competition, real competition from condo buildings to get top dollar. And the buyers who are interested in vintage, and I have them, they really love vintage, but they are used to transparency in transactions. And a number of condos used to be a complete black box when you were buying.
Right, right. Well, just a couple things before we get into that purchase process. A lot of these places have a couple strikes against them, even from the get-go.
Mhm.
For example, many co-ops do not have parking in the building.
Absolutely.
Many of them have laundry issues. It used to be some of them would have a little room on a different floor with the laundry in that little room, and then presumably the maid would go do the laundry there, right?
Mhm.
And nowadays people have fewer in-home staff members, and high-speed internet is another issue that some of these co-ops are facing. They're older structures, and so it's more difficult to work with the technology.
Well, affluent buyers today want security and parking. And that sort of runs together, but they really do. Some of them want um, amenities, but a lot of them get amenities from other sources.
Right, their
They go
clubs.
to a gym. They
Mhm.
In a 6,000 square foot apartment, you can have your own gym. But they do want security and they do want parking. And you are
Right.
absolutely right, Anne. The inability to solve that makes people choose something else.
Right. But then we have the application process, even if they find the home of their dreams. So let's talk about that.
Well, so it's this transparency. Co-ops used to be, as they are in New York, I understand, very much you make an application and we get to you when we get to you and we tell you what we want to tell you and you give us all sorts of private information.
Right.
In a condo purchase, you don't have to do that.
You get the information within the first week. You get the minutes, the budget, the declarations, the bylaws. You get to see everything about that building. And in some cases, even when you do your showing, if the listing agent was able to get their hands on that data. So it's very transparent when you buy a condo, what it is that you're getting.
You also don't have to provide, you very often you do have to provide a Thomas report because what they want, Thomas report is an economic background check and some at a certain level, it's also a criminal background check.
Right.
So it is to make sure we're not getting something terrible into our building. So there is a background, usually an economic background check, but that's it. Co-ops require you turn over actual financial documents, including tax returns. There's a lot of personal information. And so in this era of identity theft, scams, the fact that you have to hand over that information to people that you don't know who could do anything. Somebody could break into hack their computers and get your personal information is a lot scary.
And even if you own a company, sometimes they ask for financial records for your company because they want to make sure that your company is solvent. That can feel very intrusive.
So I had clients who were considering one of the big, beautiful co-ops, and the building required 15
reference letters?
Letters of reference.
No
5
kidding.
financial letters of reference. 5 personal letters of reference, and 5 character references. So what is our recommendation? 1, if you care about the value of your building, if you care about getting out what you paid for it, if you want, these are beautiful homes that deserve to go to have to do well on the market.
Right.
You've got to meet buyers in 2023, not 1988. So get rid of hoops that do not actually identify risk to the corporation or to the other shareholders. How many letters of recommendation do you really need?
Well, certainly in this era of Googling, people can pretty much figure out who you are without a letter of reference, right?
Well, exactly. And remember, that beautiful Thomas report tells you tons. So that. Be as transparent as possible and encourage the staff to share information on the building itself, its rules and regulations, and its processes for renovation. These are not state secrets, people. Tell. I mean, share. It's not, you're not going to be telling any personal information of a shareholder, but talk about the building and its processes.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's the other one little note we need to make too. And I had this happen where it was a very lovely co-op my client purchased in. They did not get financials or information about the building until they had gone through the 3-week-long process, which actually was very quick for this building, to get interviewed and approved.
Right.
Only then did they find out the financials, the capital calls, the improvements to the building that were underway. So it was a huge leap of faith for my clients to keep going down the path.
Yes. And I completely agree. And I understand that it can be embarrassing to provide this information, but if somebody is under contract, you got to find a way to trust it.
Right.
I also think, and I want your thoughts on this, Anne, when they're making improvements to the building, because your building was asking that question, what improvements can we make? For these older buildings, find a way through when you're doing your riser repairs or changing out, find a way to accommodate in-unit laundry in one of those risers.
Right. That's a must.
So, for example, on Lakeview, there's some beautiful co-ops along Lakeview, and one of them, 2440, did not have parking. The other two had parking. There's a stretch of 3 beautiful buildings. Mm-hmm. They bought parking in the garage behind the building on Clark Street. So figure out parking.
Right.
Have an answer for parking that's not just, well, you can go down the street and do this. Come up with a solution. I would put real brains on figuring out how to solve that. And to your point, high-speed internet.
Yep, absolutely. So, condo buildings. Let's talk a minute about condo buildings.
Wait. One more thing.
Okay.
199 is a co-op. It's converting, or this is the word that I got from people who live in the building. They're converting to co-op. They're converting to condo next year, or not next year. I think in the next year or two. They are they're going to buy the land. At first they could only lease it, and for whatever reason they needed to do it as a co-op when they developed the building. They're going to buy the land and turn it into a condo, and thus probably double or triple the value of those units.
Wow.
I know.
It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about condos? What's your advice when looking at condos? Let's start with A-level buildings.
Okay. So when we talk A-level buildings, obviously we're talking top of the line with the top amenities. But things change over the years because in the late 80s, there were several buildings built that were like the places to live. Olympia, 161 Chicago, Water Tower, Bloomie's, 132 Delaware. And they were the place to live if you wanted to live in Chicago in a new, pristine condominium building. They aren't the new hot thing anymore just because we keep seeing new construction and new amenities and new things take over. So very similar to if one lived in the suburbs and, a new subdivision comes in and it becomes hot and, whatever. It's the same thing vertically with these buildings, right?
Mm-hmm. I agree. They rarely hold their value because something new comes along. And some of these older buildings were designed with windows that weren't full height. And now full height is expected in a new building. And so other buildings seem just darker. There are things so what would you say?
Well, and there are floor plan issues. Think about this. 1 Mag Mile, when it was built, it was such the hot thing to have the his and her bathroom. Nobody wants a his and her bathroom. They want a big, luxurious bathroom, not 2 small ones, right? So there are some funky things about floor plans in some of these that were really cool at the time. So, you know, a building has to like know who it is, right? Isn't that basically, you have to know who you are and what you fit. And some things you're not going to be able to change. One meg mile does not own its own parking. It's part of this commercial parking thing.
Yeah.
Parking there costs a lot. It's valet. It's a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge, right? So that's something they're going to have to overcome. I think one of the great things Water Tower did was make sure that its assessments were such that they built up this huge war chest of reserves, right? So people, even though
I call it an endowment, it's like $30 million.
Yeah. Yeah. But that was smart because now people feel very comfortable buying in that building, right?
Absolutely.
So
So A-level buildings from the 70s, 80s, and even 90s. I think what the associations need to do is keep the common areas looking like today. So it's choosing in the first instance things that aren't going to age. Don't choose because these 80s entries in the dark and the wood and all of this is not playing well today.
no.
So and this is advice to A-level buildings that are being developed, try and keep things classical that you can upgrade without having to totally redo the whole thing. So
Right.
Just choose wisely and keep them looking up to date. Because, for example, I went into 136. Yeah, whatever. I'm sorry. I'm just going to call it the Four Seasons condo building.
132. Yeah.
132. Yes.
Yeah.
And those hallways look like an old hotel.
Yeah, they do. They do. Or you go into Olympia, 161 Chicago, and it's got that granite everywhere.
And
Which
everyone
is
sort
a
of bums
piece
out.
of
They like
right.
the units, but they bum out in the entry. And remember, these are people who can choose any place to live.
Right.
Keep security features up to date. So cameras, do things that make people feel really secure in your building. Parking, everything you can to keep it up to date.
Well, and you know what? Speaking of parking, let me interject here. The buzzword of the day is electric car chargers.
Yes.
So many of these buildings have not yet figured out how to make that happen. And that is an impediment to the young millennial buyer who expects to have an electric car.
Every new building has that solved.
Right.
Everyone. Because they know this is coming. Do it.
Yeah.
Do not skimp on repairs. Your point about Water Tower with $30 million in reserves, there is nothing that is not addressed immediately in that building.
Right.
Which is brilliant.
And then engage your owners to become involved, to make little changes, because little changes can make a difference. Now, I mean, I do have to shout out to the people in my building. They took an old room that was supposed to be for massages. Nobody was using it to bring in a masseuse. So they made it a little business center. It didn't take much money at all. Now there's a printer there. You can go in. There's a little library area that's lovely where you can not check out. You can just trade books, pick out a book, whatever, put a book in. They updated the fitness room. They've got a beautiful herb garden on the roof. All of these are, we have a thing in our building called Entree, and it is a refrigerator, and I can go in there and I can pick out a gourmet meal. I take a picture of the QR code, so I then pay for it. I take it upstairs, heat it up, and I've got a great dinner. And I don't have, it's great.
No, it's so smart because what they're doing, your building, and what we're recommending associations do is make a community.
Right.
Everything she described was this building is trying to make a community because you sell community. When you say this is a great place to live, the door staff knows everybody. They handle your packages beautifully. You can get a quick meal without having to leave the building. You can do all these things. Herb garden, just go upstairs and clip something. All of these things say, oh, this is a nice place to live.
Right.
And Don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
so many people want that. And the only thing is getting the word out. But
But so association boards should be watching what new buildings are doing.
mhm.
And ones that are run by these management companies, have the managers ask, what are successful buildings doing? What are the new things that the other buildings you manage, what are they doing that are low cost but really create a sense of community? And that's a great thing to do. B-level buildings do all of those same things too, the quick wins, but also focus on maintaining the physical plant, because
Right.
there is nothing that, I live in a 1960s building, and we're really focusing on the physical plant, the structure of the building, making it really sound, because the B-level building buyer cares about that the building's going to be okay. I'm not going to get a special assessment. They're planning for things. They're doing everything right. I'm going to be secure financially in this building. So
Right.
that is the biggest advice. What else would you say?
Well, and I think every building should be doing an engineering study to know what's coming down the pike. I mean, look at buildings that are going through horrific vertical riser situations because they put it off so long,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Or their chiller has to be replaced, or the boiler has to be replaced, or something like this that is a huge, and of course, windows and outside. If a building is concrete and it's getting hacked away by the elements, and the windows are, water's infiltrating because they're not caulking or doing what they need to do, that's the kind of stuff. It's just got to be done on a regular basis, and you're not helping yourself, because you and I both know what's going to happen. If you let those things deteriorate to the point that it becomes a huge special assessment, and you have too many investors in the building that don't want to spend the money, then it goes down, 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 and then the building deconverts and it loses its value. You can't do that. You have to maintain.
You can't do that. Play to your strengths, buildings. If you have a great deck, invest in great looking furniture. Make that deck 777 Michigan Avenue has a cool deck, and they've made it look spectacular. That's going to be a hangout in the summertime. Right. One of their strengths. If you don't have room for a gym, know where every gym is. Talk to people. See if you can negotiate a deal for the people who live in your building.
Great idea.
Something. Something. Security and package handling for people who live in the B buildings is key.
Yes.
So have a good focus on security, door staff if you can, but if you can't, really those butterfly security systems. Have a story, have a real proof that your building is secure, and how are you going to handle packages, especially buildings that don't have door staff.
So I think part of the answer is to get involved, right? I mean, don't sit around and complain about what's going on in your building. This is your property, your investment. So you don't have to serve on the board. You can be on a committee that helps with community or decoration or whatever, but get involved.
Get involved in a positive way, because your ideas will be much more readily received if you're not just screaming about how awful things are, but talk about ideas for fixing things rather than just screaming, because that actually helps us.
Yeah, exactly right.
You're seeing in our building. So anyway, thank you for the time to talk about this, and I think this was it's so meaningful to us as realtors, and also as people who live in condos.
Absolutely. So that's it for this week, everybody. Thank you for watching Monday Morning Coffee with Kyle and Ann. We will see you next week, same time, same place. Please reach out with your comments, questions, and we'd love to talk to you about buying and selling here in Chicago. Have a good week.